Chapter 721. However, the blazing fire dragon up above refused to let them escape. It blasted one scorching fireball after another out of its mouth, and a scorching heat wave swept relentlessly through the air. Tang Wuling could already smell an acrid charred odor coming from his clothes. Thankfully, his dragon scales protected him from sustaining any severe injuries. Yuna. Tang Wuling called in a low voice. Huh? Diana raised her head in a timid manner. Tang Wuling continued. We can't keep running like this. I'm going to hurl you in another direction and take on this thing on my own. Make sure to look after yourself. What? Will you be alright on your own? That thing is really powerful. Diana was rather concerned for his safety. Tang Wuling was silent for a moment before continuing. Yuna, what would you do if you discovered that I'm not as good a person as you think? Even worse, what would you think if I were your enemy? Diana was rather perplexed by this question. What do you mean? Another scorching heat wave swept forth, and Tang Wuling abruptly sprang forward again as he heaved an internal sigh. This dragon soul was immensely powerful, but he didn't want to leave the dragon valley yet. All of a sudden, a determined look appeared in Tang Wuling's eyes, and he held Diana toward a patch of empty ground in the distance. In the instant that he landed on the ground, he abruptly turned around and sprang back the way he'd come. He looked up at the menacing blazing fire dragon soul up above, and let loose an explosive roar. That's enough. 3 golden soul rings suddenly emerged beneath his feet as he spoke, and immediately thereafter, the third soul ring flashed as powerful blood essence aura erupted from within his body. Bright golden light instantly radiated in all directions as a massive golden dragon head appeared before letting loose an enraged roar straight up into the heavens. Compared to the golden dragon head that Tang Wuling had been able to conjure up during the Continental Young Elites tournaments, this was clearly more substantial and menacing. The thunderous roar shook the entire heavens, and the blazing fire dragon, which was just about to blast another fireball out of its mouth, suddenly stiffened before plummeting straight out of the sky as if its wings had been snapped. The roar of the golden dragon was far too fearsome for it to withstand. If another soul beast had been in the place of this dragon soul, perhaps the effect of this golden dragon roar wouldn't have been so severe. However, this was the Dragon Valley, and the purer the bloodline of a true dragon, the more they were able to experience just how fearsome the aura of the golden dragon king was. This was pure bloodline intimidation. As the blazing fire dragon plummeted from up above, Tang Wuling stomped a foot onto a nearby tree, and his body was propelled into the air toward the massive dragon soul. He swiped his right hand over his glabella, and a burst of golden light instantly erupted forth as his golden dragon spear appeared in his grasp. After landing on the ground in the distance, Diana had also been somewhat affected by that thunderous roar. After absorbing so many dragon souls, her bloodline had also taken on a faint dragon type aura, which was why she was also impacted by the bloodline of the golden dragon king. After steadying herself, she looked up to discover a giant golden dragon head projection roaring into the heavens. A golden dragon head and 3 golden soul rings. At first glance, Diana was only struck by a sense of astonishment and familiarity. However, in the next instant, she suddenly realized something. Yuna, what would you do if you discovered that I'm not as good a person as you think? Even worse, what would you think if I were your enemy? She finally understood what that meant. Could it be him? How was that possible? The one who had accompanied her this entire time was that guy? Why was he here participating in the trial held by the Tang sect headquarters in Douluo City? Why was it him? Diana was completely flabbergasted, and her heart was filled with a myriad of emotions as she stared at Tang Wuling, who was charging directly toward the blazing fire dragon. There was once a time when her heart had been swayed by this man, who had almost been stomped to death by Long Yue. There was once a time where she'd witnessed this man and his companions defeating the invincible Crazy Long and her teammates. He was stubborn, powerful and resilient, and he'd left a permanent impression on her heart. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down in her heart, she knew that if he'd never appeared, she would have perhaps already submitted to her father's will and chosen a husband for herself. However, for some reason, she simply couldn't get over his rejection and move on. Never would she have thought that he would also be participating in this mission, and that they would bump into each other in this small world. Never did she think that the masked man who'd been protecting her and helping her absorb dragon souls this entire time would be him. It was no wonder he'd been so surprised after discovering that she was a princess, yet he didn't abandon her, nor did he target her. Instead, he was like a nurturing older brother who was constantly protecting her. Prior to today, it had never even occurred to her that White 3 could be Tang Wuling. In her heart, Tang Wuling was a slightly proud yet extremely outstanding man. He had power and resilience in equal measures, and he was an unforgettable figure in her heart. In contrast, White 3 was a gentle and thoughtful big brother, a man whom she could rely on. When those two figures suddenly overlapped, Diana was struck by a smorgasbord of emotions. Boom. The blazing fire dragon plummeted into the forest and crashed into a large tree, having been completely disoriented by the impact. Tang Wuling swooped down from above with his golden dragon spear pointing forward, and he instantly appeared in the air above the blazing fire dragon. The dragon soul flapped its wings and desperately tried to get up, but the horror in its eyes was very apparent. In the face of the intimidating aura of the golden dragon king, even a powerful dragon soul such as itself was completely unable to muster up the courage to resist. Thump. Golden light flashed from the golden dragon spear, and it punctured into the dragon soul's head. Tang Wuling could immediately sense a burst of scorching energy flowing into his body in a frenzy through the golden dragon spear before rapidly fusing with his body. The power imbued within this dragon soul was far superior to that contained in the dragon clouds he'd absorbed before. The blazing fire dragon's body gradually turned transparent, and the patterns on the golden dragon spear slowly became more pronounced. At the same time, it had taken on a faint red hue from the influx of scorching energy. The dragon soul only completely disappeared after an entire minute had passed, and Tang Wuling's entire body was filled with an overwhelming sense of satiation. The blood essence aura within his body became extremely violent, and the golden dragon king bloodline surged through his veins, rapidly absorbing the energy of the dragon soul. Tang Wuling's golden dragon king bloodline didn't reject the dragon soul of a true dragon. During the absorption process, the golden scales all over his body began to radiate a fiery red light. As he absorbed the soul of the blazing fire dragon, he could sense that his resistance to fire had been enhanced. He had derived a similar feeling of enhanced elemental resistance when absorbing the dragon clouds in the past, but the feeling wasn't as pronounced. As expected, the soul of a true dragon was truly extraordinary. Tang Wuling looked down at the golden dragon spear in his hand, and it seemed to have read his mind as it immediately began to emit a faint buzzing sound. Tang Wuling waved his right hand, and the golden dragon spear vanished into his glabella as a streak of golden light. He clenched his fists, and he could feel that both his strength and his physical constitution seemed to have been enhanced. At this moment, it suddenly dawned on him that Diana had most likely identified him. After a brief hesitation, he slowly turned around. He couldn't just run away, so he had to face his problems. Diana was already making her way toward him in an expressionless manner. Tang Wuling heaved a faint sigh and said, take off your mask. Diana suddenly interjected, all right. Tang Wuling removed his mask to reveal his handsome face. Diana found herself slightly entranced by his clear and bright eyes, his long eyelashes, his chiseled nose, his attractive lips, and the near-perfect contours of his face. This was the first time that she'd been able to inspect him this close-up. You're pretty handsome, brother 3. Let's go. After that, she continued through the forest as if nothing had ever happened. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon seeing this. At this moment, Diana's voice drifted back to him. All I know is that you're my brother 3. I don't know anything else. Tang Wuling chuckled upon hearing this. She sure managed to adjust quickly. He hurriedly caught up to her before ruffling her hair. You've grown up. Hey, don't ruin my hairdo. Diana also smiled as she swatted his hand away. Just then, she'd suddenly reached an epiphany. There was no vendetta between the two of them, and perhaps the rivalry only existed because her attraction to him made her want to surpass him. However, did a woman like her really have to prove a point by being more powerful than the man she loved? Perhaps that wasn't necessary. Chapter 722. After White 3 and Tang Wuling had proven to be the same person, the guilt Diana had harbored in her heart toward Tang Wuling was wiped away. As such, she was suddenly feeling much better than she had for a long time, and she'd finally let go of something that had been weighing on her this entire time. On top of that, she thought through many things and become a braver version of herself as she was able to identify and admit some things to herself. She was a brave girl, and in the face of her courage, nothing else was a big deal. The indescribable barrier between the two of them seemed to have been torn down after Tang Wuling had removed his mask. You're not bad when you're being all pleasant and docile like this, Tang Wuling mused. Diana pursed her lips with disdain and said, don't call me docile. You're making me sound like some kind of small animal. Tang Wuling burst into laughter upon hearing this. Well, you're a hell civet, aren't you? Speaking of which, I have a little sister who's also very beautiful. Diana asked, you have a little sister? What's her name? Tang Wuling replied, her name is Naya. We share a really close bond, and she's currently studying at Shrek Academy. She's more powerful than I am, and she possesses superior aptitude as well. Her teacher is the master of the Sea God's Pavilion. Your little sister is even stronger than you. I don't believe that for a second. Dayuna pursed her lips in a skeptical manner. Big brothers were always overly generous with their praise toward their little sisters. This was something she knew from personal experience. Tang Wuling smiled, and said, if you ever get a chance to visit the Douluo continent, I can introduce her to you. I'd love that. Dayuna smiled, and replied, you better keep that promise. Tang Wuling replied, well, you'll have to come to the Douluo continent first. You're the princess of an empire, and aren't you about to get engaged? Would your father let you go somewhere so far away? Dayuna suddenly stopped before appraising Tang Wuling with an intense gaze. Are you that eager to see me get married? A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face at the sight of her sudden mood swing. That's not what I meant. This is completely up to you. No, it's up to you as well, Dayuna said in a serious manner. Tang Wuling was rather perplexed. How is this up to me? A vibrant smile suddenly appeared on Dayuna's face, but for some reason, Tang Wuling could feel chills running down his spine at the sight of her smile. If you want me to get engaged, then I'll get engaged, Dayuna said with a smile before skipping on ahead like a cheerful little bird. Tang Wuling was left scratching his head in confusion. What was that supposed to mean? Her mood really was as fickle as the weather. With the guidance of Dayuna's spiritual detection, the two of them continued on toward the center of the Dragon Valley. During their journey, the number of dragon souls they encountered decreased drastically, but every dragon soul they encountered thereafter belonged to a true dragon. Tang Wuling's Golden Dragon King bloodline really began to shine at a time like this. Even the most powerful true dragon souls would completely relinquish all resistance after hearing a golden dragon roar. However, Dayuna was unable to absorb these true dragon souls. As soon as Dayuna tried to approach them, they would immediately retaliate in a fit of fury, but they simply allowed Tang Wuling to absorb them as if that was how things were supposed to be in the first place. After absorbing his seventh true dragon soul, Tang Wuling finally arrived at the edge of a valley. The valley was like a massive bowl that had sunken into the ground, and it was technically more of a basin than a valley. When Tang Wuling and Dayuna made their way over to the edge of the valley before casting their eyes downward, both of them instantly shuddered at the sight that they were greeted by. The valley stretched as far as the eyes could see, and it was entirely filled with a faint mist. However, in the visible parts of the valley, countless massive skeletons could be seen strewn all over the ground. In the instant that Tang Wuling witnessed this harrowing sight, an indescribable sense of grief immediately welled up in his heart. He threw his head back and let loose an irrepressible roar of fury that reverberated throughout the entire valley. Dayuna cast her gaze toward him with a shocked expression on her face to find that golden scales had appeared all over his body. The roar that he had unleashed was filled with boundless sorrow and indignation, as if he were a monarch witnessing the death of his citizens. Deep within the Dragon Valley, grief-stricken roars also rang out in response, resonating with Tang Wuling's heart-wrenching cry. On the other side of the valley stood a silver figure. She wore a cold expression, and there was unbridled killing intent shimmering within her eyes. All of a sudden, she heard a grief-stricken dragon roaring out in the distance, and she reflexively cast her gaze toward that direction as a shocked expression appeared on her face. She hurriedly patted her chest with her right hand, and only then was she able to repress the impulse to let loose a roar of her own in response. She peered into the distance, and it was as if her gaze could pierce directly through the mist, thereby allowing her to see to the other side of the valley. Tang Wuling's roar lasted for several minutes before he was able to release all of the fury and grief in his heart. He squatted down in front of Dayuna and said, "Get on my back." Dayuna hurriedly straddled onto his back, winding her arms around his neck. Tang Wuling picked up her legs before winding them around his waist, and Dayuna immediately crossed her ankles to hold on more securely. This was a rather intimate pose, and Dayuna couldn't help but blush at her current situation. However, in the next instant she wound her arms even more tightly around Tang Wuling before pressing her cheek firmly against his back. Tang Wuling rose up into the air, then turned 180 degrees so he was facing the stone face of the valley. His golden dragon claws then extended out of his hands before grabbing onto the rock face. In contrast with Dayuna, he wasn't feeling any intimacy whatsoever. After witnessing the skeletons of so many dragons, he felt as if there were a massive stone weighing down on his heart. His golden dragon claws alternated as he quickly climbed down the rock face, which gave away like tofu in the face of his extraordinarily sharp claws. After descending for about 100 meters, Tang Wuling decided that this was too slow, and he detached himself from the rock face altogether, allowing his body to plummet in a state of complete freefall. Only after plummeting for several tens of meters did he grab onto the rock face with his dragon claws again, and through employing this method, he was able to descend into the valley at a far faster rate. With his immensely powerful constitution, the impact of his falls couldn't injure him in the slightest. After just a few minutes, they'd arrived at the bottom of the valley. In the instant that they landed, a bleak sensation converged from all directions. Tang Wuling closed his eyes, and he felt as if he could hear the anguished wails of countless giant dragons. At a single glance, he could see that there were at least 1,000 true dragons that had perished here. Not only that, but they weren't even given proper burials, and their carcasses had been strewn into this valley like trash in a landfill. Just what kind of powerful being could have reduced the almighty dragon clan to such a tragic state? Tang Wuling crouched down and said, "You can get down now." Dayuna almost wanted to ask him to carry her for a while longer, but she could sense that Tang Wuling was experiencing some powerful negative emotions at the moment, so she obediently did as she was told. It was a completely different feeling witnessing these dragon skeletons from the bottom of the valley compared to when they were at the edge of the valley up above. Only after entering the valley did they truly comprehend the scale of this horrendous tragedy. Even the smallest of these skeletons were several tens of meters tall, and the largest were even hundreds of meters tall. All of these skeletons were emanating faint energy fluctuations, as if they were all dormant giant beasts. It was difficult to imagine just how powerful they would have been back when they were alive. Tang Wuling took a deep breath before slowly making his way over to the closest dragon skeleton to him, then laying a hand on its surface. The bleak aura in the surrounding area influenced his emotions, and he felt as if he could hear the anguished howls let loose by this giant dragon prior to its death. Faint patterns could be seen on the dragon skeleton, and fearsome energy fluctuations surged through the air. Chapter 723. Dayuna didn't dare to touch the skeleton as she could sense that the power emanating from it was rejecting her. What a terrifying place this was. Dayuna sidled up closer to Tang Wuling with a wary look on her face. Strangely enough, as soon as she came within 3 meters of Tang Wuling, the terrifying aura of the surrounding dragon skeletons no longer had any effect on her. Meanwhile, Tang Wuling appeared to have remained completely unaffected. He continued to walk deeper into the valley, laying his hand on one skeleton after another, and the deeper they went, the more enormous the dragon skeletons around them became. The skeletons all resembled small mountains, and oppressive dragon roars rang out from all directions, as if the sky were falling. Tang Wuling felt as if he'd returned to an ancient battlefield on which one giant dragon was slain after another by the fearsome enemies they faced. This was a powerful clan that had once ruled over the entire continent, but they'd gradually fallen into obscurity in the aftermath of this battle. Just what had happened? What could have taken place to have reduced the almighty dragon clan to such a pitiful state? At the very least, as far as Tang Wuling knew, true dragon soul beasts were exceedingly rare on the Douluo continent, perhaps even downright non-existent. There was once a legendary beast that was referred to as the beast god, and that was a gold-eyed black dragon king. If these skeletons had all belonged to giant dragons, then just how powerful was the dragon clan in the past? Even the weakest true dragons were most likely comparable in power to the titled Douluos of the human race, so those true dragons with skeletons that were hundreds of meters tall would have been unimaginably powerful. Was the dragon clan really bound to fall into complete obscurity? Tang Wuling sighed as he continued onward while the bloodline in his body churned violently. In the distance, the silver figure had also entered the valley. Strangely enough, she was mirroring Tang Wuling's actions, slowly striding onward while stroking each of the dragon skeletons she passed with tears shimmering in her eyes. Why were the heavens so unfair to the dragon clan? Why did the divine realm banish the dragon god, forcing the dragon clan to revolt? The dragon clan had fallen entirely due to the jealousy of the heavens. It was all the fault of those accursed humans. As she continued deeper into the valley, the grief emanating from the silver figure became more and more pronounced. A layer of silver light had appeared all over her entire body, and the auras emanating from the dragon skeletons eased slightly in her wake. After walking for a long while, Tang Wuling suddenly stopped as he caught sight of a colossal skeleton up ahead. The skeleton was over a kilometer tall, and it was entirely brown in color. In contrast with the other skeletons in the valley, the immensely heavy aura emanating from it made the gravity in an area with a radius of several kilometers around it far heavier than it was elsewhere. This was a skeleton with no wings, but all of the bones were extremely thick. In particular, its forelimbs were like pillars that were supporting the entire sky. What a familiar aura. Where have I sensed this before? Why do I feel an aura that's so similar to Big Brother Long's? Dayuna's words immediately answered the question in Tang Wuling's mind. Indeed, wasn't this the aura of the mountain dragon Dragon King. Tang Wulin's entire body shuddered as he realized that this gargantuan skeleton belonged to none other than the Mountain Dragon King. He slowly made his way toward the massive skeleton, and an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart as he sensed the energy fluctuations emanating from it. Compared to the other dragon skeletons, the aura emanating from the skeleton of the Mountain Dragon King was far more powerful, and this was an aura that was filled with unadulterated rage and resentment. Only at close quarters did Tang Wulin notice that there was a gargantuan crack splitting the skeleton exactly down the middle from the front of its head to the tip of its tail. This meant that its enormous body had seemingly been sliced in half by some kind of weapon. Tang Wulin had experienced the defensive prowess of a Mountain Dragon King from Long Yue before, but a true Mountain Dragon King's defensive prowess was most definitely hundreds, if not thousands of times more powerful than Long Yue's. How had such a tremendously powerful being fallen here in this manner? Tang Wulin closed his eyes as his bloodline churned within his body, and was struck by a sense of asphyxiation, as if there were a mountainous weight on his chest. If not for his Golden Dragon King bloodline, he wouldn't be where he was today, and there was no way that he would have been able to attend Shrek Academy. All of his past victories, his past breakthroughs, and even his progression in forging, all of that was inseparable from the fact that he possessed this Golden Dragon King bloodline. A thought suddenly occurred to him, prompting him to do something for the Dragon Clan as repayment. As soon as this thought emerged in his mind, it quickly grew to become an irrepressible desire. He had to do something. Tang Wulin took a deep breath before patting the Mountain Dragon King skeleton before him with a nod of his head. He then skirted around the gargantuan skeleton and continued onward, upon which he discovered another valley. It was a valley within a valley. The ground behind the Mountain Dragon King's skeleton had caved in to form a massive crater with a diameter of over 10,000 meters. After arriving at the edge of the crater, Tang Wulin suddenly discovered that the voice that had been calling him this entire time instantly grew louder. This was the source of his calling. Tang Wulin peered into the valley to find that it was at least a kilometer deep. There seemed to be a massive ball of light shimmering within its depths, and the ball of light seemed to be comprised of 7-colored rainbow mist, making it impossible to see what lay within the valley. Tang Wulin could immediately sense that something within the valley was calling him. He turned to Dai Yuna and said, "Yuna, go back using your Dragon Ball. The giant dragon aura here is too strong, and this valley is very dangerous, so I can't take you with me. If something were to happen to you." Dai Yuna interjected, "No, I'm coming with you. How can I turn back at such a critical juncture? I'll die of curiosity. As long as I stay close to you, I won't be affected by the auras of these dragon skeletons. In any case, I can't just leave like this. Can you carry me down there on your back again? I can always leave if we encounter any danger." Tang Wulin hesitated momentarily as he contemplated the situation. He could sense any beings in the valley down below that could pose a threat to him. So after a brief pause, he nodded and said, "All right, but make sure you don't stray away from me." "Of course. Why would I try to get away from you?" Dai Yuna giggled before abruptly jumping onto his back. Tang Wulin used the same method he'd employed before to slide down this valley, and the more he approached the bottom of the valley, the louder the voice in his heart became. Just what was this place? Could it be that there were even more powerful beings than the Mountain Dragon King in this valley? Tang Wulin slowly descended down the face of the valley, and he was about to enter the vast expanse of shimmering rainbow mist soon. All of a sudden, the mist shuddered slightly before parting on its own to grant him passage. Unbeknownst to him, the most dangerous place in this dragon valley was none other than this dragon tomb. There were no dragon souls guarding this place, as they would simply be redundant. In the face of the powerful auras emanating from the giant dragon skeletons, a normal human being would have been crushed to death long ago. Of course, the most powerful beings among the human race could remain unscathed here, but they weren't able to access this place as they were restricted by the laws of this small world. After passing through the glowing rainbow mist, a shocked expression appeared on Tang Wulin's face as he found himself looking at a giant dragon. To put it more accurately, this was a giant dragon soul. This dragon soul was about twice the size of the Mountain Dragon King's skeleton, and its entire body was shimmering with rainbow light. Even all of its scales were each of 7 different colors. The scales weren't completely uniform, and each and every one of them seemed to differ in shape, but they somehow gave off a harmonious air, as if they were a massive panel consisting of countless gems. Chapter 724. Its proud head was raised high up into the air, and an indescribable aura was emanating from its entire body. In the instant that Tang Wulin caught sight of this dragon soul, the Golden Dragon King bloodline within his body suddenly began to churn with renewed ferocity, making him feel as if his bloodline aura were about to erupt outward at any moment. Even the remaining 12 Golden Dragon King seals were trembling slightly. What's this feeling? Tang Wulin suddenly recalled back to the history lesson that Wu Yue had given him regarding the Dragon Clan. The Dragon God? Could this be the soul of the Dragon God? Tang Wulin was astonished as this thought occurred to him. Could it be that this gargantuan rainbow dragon soul belonged to the legendary Dragon God? The very same Dragon God that had led all of the beast gods on a revolution that had almost destroyed the entire divine realm? Did this mean that the one that had drawn him to this place was none other than the Dragon God itself? Tang Wulin drifted onto the ground with Dai Yuna on her back. Even though Dai Yuna was still in close proximity to him, she still fainted on the spot as she let loose a muffled groan. Tang Wulin hurriedly caught her before checking her vital functions, and he was quite relieved to find that she was only unconscious. He pulled out Dai Yuna's Dragon Ball and held onto her hand after placing the ball in her grasp in an attempt to activate it, only to find that the Dragon Ball seemed to be completely non-functional here. As such, he could only hold Dai Yuna in his arms, not daring to let her leave his side as he didn't know what was going to happen next. He raised his head to look up at the colossal dragon soul, and after a brief period of unrest in his bloodline, he was suddenly struck by an indescribable sense of intimacy from this gigantic dragon soul. Wu Yue had told him that following the death of the Dragon God, it had been split up into the Golden Dragon King and the Silver Dragon King. Could it be that this was the origin of his Golden Dragon King bloodline? In that case, the bloodline in Wu Yue's most likely belonged to the Silver Dragon King rather than a 7-colored dragon as she proclaimed. So that's why she came to the academy to find me and made such an effort to get closer to me. An indescribable sense of pain began to throb in his heart. It turned out that she had approached him with some kind of ulterior motive after all. The soul of the Dragon God didn't appear to be a living being. It merely stood in a completely stationary manner at the center of the valley with dense rainbow light radiating from its body. Tang Wulin took a deep breath before slowly striding forward with Dai Yuna in his arms until he was very close to the dragon soul. After a brief hesitation, Tang Wulin pulled out a piece of uncommon metal from within his storage cell tool before flicking his wrist, sending the piece of metal flying toward the dragon soul. The dragon soul shuddered slightly, and the piece of metal abruptly vanished. Tang Wulin had clearly seen that the piece of uncommon metal had been instantaneously vaporized. Just how terrifying was the energy contained within this gargantuan dragon soul? With that in mind, Tang Wulin swept a hand over his forehead, and his golden dragon spear immediately appeared in his grasp. Seeing as he had already come this far, he had to see just what he could do here. After placing Dai Yuna down beside him, he carefully extended his golden dragon spear toward the dragon soul in a slow and cautious manner. He was extremely nervous during this process, and he reflexively began holding his breath. As soon as the golden dragon spear came into contact with the dragon soul, the entire spear immediately shuddered violently. Immediately thereafter, a buzzing sound rang out before instantly growing louder, and the enormous dragon soul seemed to have sprung to life. A thunderous dragon's roar erupted within the entire dragon valley. All of the dragon souls that were wandering the dragon valley almost instantly sprawled onto the ground, and all of the dragon skeletons in the dragon tomb were trembling gently, as if they'd been awakened and were trying to struggle to their feet. Tang Wulin felt as if he had entered a rainbow world that was entirely different from the real world that he was situated in. In his mind, a crimson figure had appeared. He looked on as the crimson figure pointed a finger up into the sky, following which a giant crimson sword that seemed to span the entire distance between heaven and earth came crashing down toward him. Everything around him also turned crimson in this instant, and he felt as if his entire body had been instantly torn apart. The excruciating agony he was struck by made him let loose a blood-curdling cry, and right at this moment, a silver figure abruptly appeared beside him. She reached out with her right hand, which quickly expanded before coming into contact with the dragon soul. Her body then shuddered as well before a rainbow film of light appeared all around her. In contrast with Tang Wulin, she still managed to retain her consciousness and didn't seem to have been affected by the dragon soul at all. She turned toward the man beside her, who was holding his golden dragon spear with a dazed and agonized expression on his face, and she murmured to herself, "Why does fate insist on being so cruel? Why are you here? Why did you have to bring yourself to me? Do you know that if I were to fuse with you now and extract your Golden Dragon King bloodline out of your body, I'll have a chance to awaken part of the Dragon God's power. But if I were to do that, you'd die for sure. I've already tried to avoid you, to distance myself from you. So why did you have to appear here at a time like this? Why?" However, Tang Wuling was unable to hear enraged interrogation. All of a sudden, his body shuddered, and a burst of suction force erupted from each of their bodies, drawing them toward one another. Tang Wuling's body began to rapidly approach the silver-haired woman while the dragon soul of the dragon god suddenly hurtled directly toward them as a ball of scintillating rainbow light. If you die, I'll be able to awaken the power of the dragon god, and no one will be able to stop me in this world. No one will be able to stop me from taking revenge for the dragon race and all of the soul beasts. Do you know that, Tang Wuling? Why did you have to come here? She slowly raised her right hand, which had transformed into a silver-scaled dragon claw. She inched the claw closer and closer to Tang Wuling, and she only had to swipe it down in one quick motion to take his life, upon which she'd immediately be able to attain the power that belonged to the Golden Dragon King bloodline within his body. However, she simply couldn't bring herself to do this. Tears began to flow down her face as she grappled with her internal conflict. No. She shook her head vigorously as she abruptly withdrew her right hand before aiming a vicious kick at Tang Wuling's chest. His body was immediately sent flying like a cannonball, and he crashed into the rock face of the valley in the distance with his golden dragon spear still held firmly in his grasp. A strong surge of rainbow light then swept forth toward the silver-haired young woman. All of a sudden, Diana shuddered as she lay on the ground, and something seemed to be about to emerge from within her body. A faint burst of rainbow light had also materialized around her to protect her body. However, the light was extremely feeble and seemed to be about to shatter at any moment. This was none other than the energy of the dragon soul she'd absorbed working to shield her body. So he's chosen her. A wry smile appeared on the silver-haired woman's face, and she took a deep breath as she murmured to herself, perhaps this is the best choice for him. She stepped forward, and scintillating rainbow light surged around her as she flicked Diana up into the air with her right foot, then waved her right hand to conjure up a burst of silver light around her. As soon as the silver light enveloped her body, her dragon ball began to glow brightly, and she instantly vanished on the spot. The silver-haired woman then turned around, and the stream of rainbow light surged into her body in a frenzy, causing her aura to swell drastically at an alarming rate. At this moment, the dragon soul of the dragon god had already become rather insubstantial. However, it still diverted a portion of its power toward Tang Wuling before dragging him toward the silver-haired woman again. However, before he could reach the silver-haired woman, she would always kick him away with tears in her eyes. All the while, rainbow light continued to flow into their bodies, constantly elevating their auras in the process. All of a sudden, the seventh golden dragon king seal within Tang Wuling's body was broken, yet his body had become as resolute as an iron board within the rainbow light, thereby allowing him to easily absorb the power from within the seventh seal. Immediately thereafter, the eighth seal was broken as well, and a fourth golden soul ring appeared beneath his feet. Tang Wuling let loose a muffled groan as blood began to flow from all seven of his orifices. Even though the rainbow light was constantly nurturing his body, he was still just a human. He'd already absorbed so much energy from dragon clouds and dragon souls, so this enormous influx of energy from the two broken seals was too much for him to handle, and his body was on the verge of falling apart. The silver-haired woman bit down on her lower lip, and she encircled the air before her with her arms as she let loose a loud dragon's roar. Her body began to rapidly expand, and she transformed into a giant silver dragon that was over a kilometer tall in the blink of an eye. She then abruptly spread open her wings to shield Tang Wuling from all of the rainbow light, withstanding the streams of light all on her own. Tears flowed relentlessly from her eyes. Why do humans feel pain? Is this what it's like to have human emotions? Is this what we're lacking? Are humans able to evolve because they have these emotions? As rainbow light continued to surge into her body, a rainbow sheen appeared over her silver scales. At the same time, her aura was also growing more and more powerful, to the extent that the entire dragon valley was trembling in her presence. However, the giant dragon paid no heed to all of this, and it seemed to only have eyes for the unconscious young man lying on the ground before it. Chapter 725. Is this all meant to be? Why can't I kill him? Could this be the biggest obstacle to the dragon god's reawakening? Why? Why does it have to be like this? I should kill him. After I do that, nothing will be able to stop me. If I kill him, I'll be able to, but I can't do it. It's so simple, but I just can't do it. As the dragon soul of the dragon god gradually became more and more insubstantial, two rhomboid crystals began to appear at the very center of the dragon soul's body. The two crystals hovered in midair, and one of them was golden while the other was silver in color. Both of them were radiating halos of seven-colored light. In the sky above, one dragon cloud after another quickly surged toward this place while countless dragon souls jumped down the sides of the valley in a frenzy. Like moths to a flame, all of them transformed into a part of this rainbow energy that continued to inject itself into the enormous silver dragon. The gargantuan silver dragon had countless cracks all over its scales, but with the influx of this rainbow light, those cracks slowly began to heal over. At the same time, a layer of enamel similar to the one that had appeared on Tang Wuling's body began to surface over her skin. However, this layer of enamel was seven-colored in her case, rather than invisible, as was the case for Tang Wuling. In the end, after the final wisp of rainbow light vanished into the silver dragon's body, it raised its head and roared up into the heavens, making the entire small world tremble violently as a result. A terrifying aura erupted from her body, causing all of the rock faces around the valley to collapse and cave in. The gargantuan silver dragon slowly shrank down before reverting back into a silver-haired young woman. She drifted over to the two crystals in a flash, then raised a hand to grab onto the silver one before pressing it against her chest. After that, she turned toward Tang Wuling, who was still lying unconscious in the distance, and she took a deep breath before abruptly swaying the golden crystal directly toward him. The day I muster up the courage to kill you will be the day the human race is destroyed. Her cold voice echoed throughout the collapsed valley as tears continued to flow down her cheeks. The golden crystal landed on Tang Wuling's chest before vanishing in a flash, and the silver-haired woman took a step forward, upon which she abruptly vanished as if she'd stepped into space itself. In the sky above, the massive spatial rift in the small world was trembling violently. The burly bald man turned to the black-haired man and asked, I can't hold on for much longer. The laws of this world are too strong. What do we do, boss? The black-haired man harumphed coldly in response. We have to hold on until the end even if it costs us our lives. Can you not feel it? Our lord has already found that place. There's no mistaking it. That's the aura of the dragon god, and what we're looking for is situated right over there. That's the place where all of the dragon bodies will lay to rest by the final soul fragment of the dragon god following its demise. Everyone, this is when we need to dig deep and hold on with all our might. Right at this moment, silver light flashed, and a silver figure suddenly appeared in the air above their heads. She looked up at the black spatial rift, and she suddenly reached out with both hands before making a grabbing motion. The entire sky was instantly torn apart by her gesture, revealing a gargantuan rift that was several tens of times larger than the previous one. Go! The silver woman commanded in a cold voice, and in the next instant, she'd already risen up into the air before vanishing into the black rift. The six figures down below each let loose a long cry before also rising up into the air, flying into the vastly expanded rift as streaks of light that disappeared in the blink of an eye. The entire small world trembled slightly and the gigantic rift began to seal. On a mountain summit, light flashed, and Diana appeared out of thin air. Black One quickly strode forward to assess her condition, and it appeared that he wasn't surprised in the slightest that she wasn't wearing a mask, thereby indicating that he was already aware of her identity. After a brief assessment, Black One heaved a faint sigh of relief. It's all right, she's only suffering from very slight spiritual trauma. After leaving the Dragon Valley, her soul power will gradually recover without the restriction of that small world, so she'll wake up soon. Thank heavens this princess came back safe and sound. At this moment, light flashed again, and another figure appeared, stumbling forward a few steps before arresting his own momentum. He turned to Black One and extended a respectful salute. Black One. White 13, you came out as well? Black One's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. During their internal selection process, he'd ascertained that this White 13's powers and aptitude definitely ranked among the top 3 of all White class agents. As such, he was quite surprised to see White 13 emerging from the Dragon Valley before 3 months had passed. White 13 hurriedly explained, Black One, something big seems to be happening inside the Dragon Valley. All of the dragon clouds in the sky suddenly converged toward the same place before quickly vanishing. When I tried to approach that place to conduct an investigation, the entire Dragon Valley began to twist and warp violently as if it were about to collapse. On top of that, the energy fluctuations inside the Dragon Valley had become very strange. I saw a massive rift appear in the sky from afar, and the situation was getting too perilous for me to handle. So I activated my Dragon Ball right away. A rift? A hint of astonishment appeared on Black One's face upon hearing this. When spatial changes took place in a small world, that was a sign that the small world was on the brink of collapse. To the Tang sect, the Dragon Valley was an extremely important small world that was under its control. Only the cream of the crop among the white class agents received opportunities to train there, and it had nurtured many exceptional talents for the Tang sect. As such, the collapse of that small world would be a massive loss for the Tang sect. Right at this moment, one figure began to appear after another amid flashes of light. They were all white class agents who had fled from the Dragon Valley. All of their accounts of the situation were quite similar. There were also some who said that the dragon souls they were battling suddenly charged toward a certain direction without any regard for anything else, and immediately thereafter, the entire small world trembled as if it were about to collapse. As such, they hurriedly exited the small world using their dragon balls in order to escape the carnage. Black One began to conduct a headcount. Aside from the few agents that had already exited the Dragon Valley in advance, the majority of the rest of the agents had also returned. A wise man always distanced himself from danger. All of the agents had learned about small worlds prior to coming on this trip, so they knew that once changes began to take place throughout an entire small world, there was a good chance that it could collapse. If a small world were to collapse, everything within it would be reduced to nothingness, so they naturally fled without any delay. 28, 29. There's one person missing. A dark expression appeared on Black One's face as he commanded. Report your numbers to me one by one, starting from White 1. Moments later, Black One's expression changed slightly as he deduced that it was White 3 who was missing. We've lost connection to the Dragon Valley. A hunchbacked old man suddenly exclaimed as he stumbled back a few steps. At the same time, the patterns on the mountain summit quickly dimmed and lost all of their luster. Black One's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. Was the small world really collapsing? But White 3 hadn't made it out yet. Just as he knew who White 7 was, he was also aware of White 3's identity. He was the #1 rising star of Shrek Academy, and he'd made exceptional contributions to the Tang sect as well. The Tang sect was not like the Douluo Empire. This was a man who had led a team to defeat the most outstanding talents of Monster Academy. Barring any mishaps, he would definitely grow to take on an extremely important role in the Tang sect in the future. If he were to die here, then that would be a heavy blow to the entire sect. It was just that he had no idea what had happened to White 3, so he could only wait until White 7 woke up before asking her about the situation. Right at this moment, Diana groaned as she slowly regained consciousness. She blinked with a blank look on her face at the sight of all of the agents around her before abruptly springing up into a sitting position. In order to conceal her identity, Black One had already put on a new mask for her. Brother 3, where are you? She cried out as she quickly scrambled to her feet. All of the agents fell into a grim silence. When they'd heard that connection with the Dragon Valley had been lost, they knew that this comrade of theirs would most likely be lost to them forever. Complete annihilation always resulted following the collapse of a small world, so there was no way that he could have been spared. After White 7 rose to her feet, Black One had already made his way toward her. What happened, White 7? How did you become separated from White 3? What was he doing in there? Black One asked in a grim voice. Chapter 726. Diana hurriedly replied, Black One, we found the dragon tomb, and inside was a massive 7-colored being that Brother 3 speculates could be the dragon soul of the dragon god. The dragon type aura, and there was too much for me to bear, so I immediately fell unconscious, and I don't know what happened after that. The dragon tomb? Many of the agents' eyes lit up as they heard this. However, their expressions then quickly fell again. Even if the dragon tomb truly did exist, there was no point thinking about it anyways as the entire Dragon Valley small world had already ceased to exist. Black One's brows were tightly furrowed as he fell completely silent. Where's Brother 3? Everyone came back, so where is he? Diana asked in an elated manner. They had found the dragon tomb. At this moment, she didn't really care all that much whether she was going to receive a dragon soul bone. All she hoped for was that Tang Wuling had reaped some benefits from the dragon tomb. Black One remained silent. What is it? Diana looked around at everyone with confusion in her eyes, but a hint of realization quickly appeared on her face as she said, Oh, I see. Brother 3 still hasn't come out, right? That makes sense. He's so exceptional that it's only right for him to be able to last longer than all of us. Black One sighed as he shook his head, and revealed, White 7, we've already lost connection with the Dragon Valley small world, so it's most likely already collapsed. There was no point in prolonging the pain. The truth had to come out sooner or later, even though he could already sense that this princess seemed to have developed feelings for Tang Wuling that went beyond camaraderie. Diana faltered slightly upon seeing this before abruptly screaming, That's impossible. It's not true. He's like a fish in water in the Dragon Valley, and the power of his bloodline can intimidate all dragon souls. He's the blessed child of the Dragon Valley, and without him, there's no way we would have been able to find the dragon tomb. How could he have failed to identify that the small world was collapsing? He managed to help me escape, so he must be capable of returning as well. Try contacting the Dragon Valley small world again. You must have made a mistake the first time. Black One shook his head and said, Please calm down, White 7. You've learned about small worlds prior to coming here, so you should be aware of what it means for connection to a small world to be lost. No, this is impossible. Arg. Diana's screams echoed throughout the entire valley. After an indeterminate period of time had passed, Tang Wuling slowly regained consciousness. His entire body was in agony, and he felt as if he'd been torn apart at the seams. In summary, it was not a good feeling. His memory blanked out at the point where he'd laid the tip of his golden dragon spear onto the giant dragon soul. It was also at that instant that he was filled with regret. Boundless energy had surged toward him from the dragon soul, and he didn't think that he could directly absorb the dragon soul of the dragon god. At this moment, his entire body was in excruciating pain, and he had to work hard to regulate his breathing in order to alleviate the pain somewhat. After looking down at his own body, he was shocked to find that he seemed to have grown slightly. However, there were also countless thin gashes that riddled his skin, as if he'd almost grown out of his skin like a cocoon. Scabs had already appeared all over these gashes, but that only resulted in an even more terrifying sight to behold. It's no wonder I'm in so much pain. What happened back then? Tang Wuling calmed himself down, then rested for a while before attempting to muster up some strength in his body. His soul power was still being restricted, but he managed to activate the power of his bloodline right away. Immediately thereafter, he was completely flabbergasted by the tsunami-like waves of bloodline aura surging within his body. Powerful waves of bloodline energy flowed through all of his meridians, and his bones, internal organs, and meridians had all taken on a bright golden hue that was far more pronounced than before. As he circulated his immense bloodline power through his body, all of his pain was instantly alleviated, only to be replaced by a numb and itchy sensation as an indescribable sense of power spread through his entire body. He was then greeted by the sight of all of the scabs detaching from his body, revealing strips of slightly raw and pink skin. However, moments later, these strips of skin also returned to normal, and it was as if he'd never been afflicted by those countless thin gashes in the first place. On top of that, a layer of smooth and glossy enamel had appeared all over his entire body. What's this feeling? Tang Wuling only exerted what he felt to be a slight amount of force into the ground, and his body rose up into the air slightly from a flat-lying position. He supported himself up with his hands and catapulted himself to his feet. What immense power. Where's the dragon soul of the dragon god? Where's Yuna? Diana had already disappeared, as had the gargantuan dragon soul, and only a completely empty valley was left behind. Even the powerful dragon type aura fluctuations and the voice that had been calling out to him in his heart had vanished without a trace. What happened? Tang Wuling assessed his surroundings in a dumbstruck manner, temporarily at a loss for what to do. He could sense that something had to have happened to him during the period of time that he'd been unconscious, but he couldn't remember anything. After a brief moment of contemplation, Tang Wuling released his bloodline aura, upon which he was stunned to witness 4 golden soul rings emerge from beneath his feet before revolving around his body. 4 rings. How was this possible? He'd only just broken the 6th golden dragon king seal not long ago, thereby attaining the 3rd ring. Where had this 4th ring come from? He hurriedly inspected the golden dragon king seals within his body and was shocked to find that 2 of them really were missing. Only 10 seals remained of the original 18, while the first 8 seals had all vanished. Could it be the dragon soul of the dragon god? Had its power helped him break 2 seals in quick succession? Tang Wuling didn't know how to react to this. It was obviously a good thing that he'd become more powerful, but he was only 15 years old and had already broken 8 seals. What was going to become of him from now on? He could still clearly recall the agony he'd suffered while breaking the 6th seal, and even though he didn't know how the 7th and 8th seals had been broken, the gashes that had appeared all over his body clearly indicated that it had been an extremely perilous process. He wanted to try and contact old Tang, only to be greeted by silence, as if old Tang had never even existed in the first place. In the future, he naturally had to break the 9th ninth seal. Tang Wuling didn't know how far ahead in the future that would be, and no one was around at present to give him an answer. After a brief period of speechlessness, Tang Wuling gradually came to terms with his current situation. What had happened was irreversible, so there was no point lamenting over it. After all, it wasn't like he could redo the seals. As opposed to crying over spilled milk, it was much better to keep facing forward and improving oneself. He had thought that breaking the seventh seal would be slightly easier after absorbing so much energy from dragon clouds and dragon souls, but who would have thought that he'd be plunged into such a perilous situation anyway? A thought suddenly occurred to Tang Wuling, and he released his golden dragon claws. After breaking the eighth seal, the golden dragon king scales on his body had clearly become thicker and heavier than before, and only through inspection at close quarters could he see the layer of enamel over his body, which was reflecting the light in a peculiar manner. Thus, he climbed up the valley by alternating his claws. He wasn't in a hurry to use his dragon ball to get out of this place. Diana was most likely safe, as there would be a corpse lying around had she perished. As such, she had most likely only disappeared, which meant that she should have been teleported out of this small world by her dragon ball. Now that the dragon soul of the dragon god had disappeared, he wanted to climb out of the valley and see for himself what had happened to this small world. After climbing to the top of the valley, Tang Wuling was greeted by the sight of a boundless expanse of dragon skeletons once again. These skeletons still retained powerful dragon-type auras, as well as the bleakness that had once swayed Tang Wuling's emotions. It took Tang Wuling a few days to arrive back at the edge of the dragon tomb, then climbed his way to the top again. He could sense that something seemed to have changed within the dragon valley. The change most likely had something to do with the disappearance of the dragon god's dragon soul, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed. He had already reaped many rewards from this trip. As for a dragon soul bone, Tang Wuling had been very interested in something like that prior to coming here, but now he had no intention of obtaining soul bones from these skeletons. Was it time for him to leave? Under normal circumstances, the fact that there were no more benefits to be derived from this place would be an indication that it was time to leave. However, there still seemed to be a massive weight on his chest, a weight that had been present from the moment he'd set foot in the dragon tomb. The golden dragon king bloodline had made him who he was today, and if the golden dragon king really was a half of the dragon god as the legend suggested, then he was technically a part of the dragon clan. As such, it caused him immense discomfort to see so many dragon skeletons lying out in the open. Whenever he battled anyone with dragon-type martial souls, his golden dragon king bloodline had always played a vital role in his victories. Only with the power of this bloodline had he been able to make it to where he was today. Without it, he didn't even know if he'd have the confidence to continue cultivating. Chapter 727. His dragon bloodline had given him everything, so it was time for him to give back to the dragon clan. At the very least, this was an ideal method to cleanse and cultivate his soul. With that in mind, Tang Wuling didn't hesitate any longer as he began to dig holes with his golden dragon claws, starting from the edge of the dragon tomb valley. Even though he couldn't use any soul power, his claws were peerlessly sharp, and using his golden dragon shakes the earth, he was able to stomp large craters into the ground. At the same time, he made use of his Tangsect techniques, using his ghost shadow perplexing track to enhance his speed and agility, his mysterious jade hands to bolster his golden dragon claws, and his controlling crane capturing dragon to direct soil out of the holes he was digging. A few hours later, he had dug out a massive hole. He then carefully placed the closest true dragon skeleton into the hole. It would be much easier to simply push the skeleton into the hole, but in order to maintain its original form, he had to be extremely careful and arrange the bones together in their original configuration. As such, it took him an entire day to bury the first true dragon skeleton. For some reason, the grief that Tang Wuling was experiencing abated significantly after burying the skeleton. Even the energy fluctuations emanating from the dragon bones had become a lot more feeble. After burying the first dragon skeleton, a sense of achievement instantly welled up in his heart. Dragon skeletons littered the ground, stretching as far as the eyes could see, but Tang Wuling was completely determined to see this through to the end. He had only just buried one of the small skeletons, and even that had taken him an entire day, so the larger skeletons would most definitely require a longer time to bury. He couldn't calculate exactly how much time he would need, but he had set his mind to this task, and he was going to complete it no matter how long it would take. This was the same determination that had prompted him to become a soul master. He disregarded all concepts of time as he began to use his golden dragon shocks the heavens and golden dragon shakes the earth as a foundation to begin his burial mission. As time passed, Tang Wuling grasped some tricks and techniques that made him more efficient. For example, if he were to plunge his golden dragon spear into the ground before unleashing his golden dragon shakes the earth, the resulting crater would be larger than if he were to only use his claws. The utilization of his bloodline power when unleashing the attack also became an extremely important factor to consider. As such, he had unintentionally begun to cultivate the two soul skills that he'd created. Within the dragon tomb, the powerful dragon-type energy fluctuations were able to draw the natural energies in this small world toward this place. As a result, Tang Wuling witnessed firsthand just how dragon souls came into existence. During the seventh day of his burial endeavor, natural energy suddenly surged violently near a massive true dragon skeleton in the distance, following which a dragon soul slowly materialized. The dragon soul took a total of 2 hours to manifest, and much to Tang Wuling's surprise, it charged toward him without any hesitation as soon as it appeared. However, before Tang Wuling had a chance to do anything, it transformed into a stream of light that flowed willingly into his body. Tang Wuling's main concern was that the supply of food he was carrying wouldn't be able to support him until he could bury all of these dragon skeletons. To give all of these skeletons proper burials was a dream of his, but he wasn't prepared to starve to death for his dream. As such, he was going to stop after he'd exhausted his food supply. However, after the dragon soul fused into his body, he discovered that the rich natural energies and true dragon aura imbued within it were much more satiating than any food he could eat. Just the energy from that one dragon soul alone could ensure that he'd be able to work for an entire day without eating. Looking around at all of the dragon skeletons in the tomb, Tang Wuling suddenly yelled, "All of you still possess sentience, right?" In that instant, he suddenly understood that all of these dragon skeletons had to possess sentient will. Otherwise, why would that dragon soul have directly fused itself into his body? These skeletons wanted to help him, which meant that they also wanted proper burials for themselves. This made Tang Wuling even more determined to see this through to the end. If you want me to help bury all of you, then give me some energy every once in a while. Only then will I be able to keep this up. All of you can rest assured because I promise that I won't be leaving until every single one of you has been buried. Tang Wuling's words seemed to have triggered a string of faint energy fluctuations within the entire dragon tomb valley, and a hint of elation suddenly emerged from the overwhelming aura of grief. At this moment, all of the bleak white dragon bones seemed to be glowing again. They're rejoicing because of my actions. A smile instantly appeared on Tang Wuling's face, and he wiped the sweat from his forehead as he continued in his efforts, burying one dragon skeleton after another. During this process, Tang Wuling also gained a clearer understanding of the bone structures of different types of true dragons. After a while, he didn't even need to use other skeletons as reference, and he was still able to replicate the exact configurations of the skeletons with unerring accuracy as he buried them. There was nothing around him that could keep track of time, so he didn't know how long he'd been in here. Every day, a true dragon soul would materialize before fusing into his body to maintain his energy levels. Aside from resting and meditating for 8 hours per day, Tang Wuling spent all of his time digging holes and burying skeletons. This was undoubtedly an extremely boring process, but as someone who had studied forging for so many years, Tang Wuling was already accustomed to the boredom. Even he had failed to notice that the dragon type aura emanating from his body was growing more powerful by the day. The bleak aura of grief in the dragon tomb also lessened as the number of dragon skeletons dwindled, and Tang Wuling was feeling a lot more relaxed as a result. During this process, he spotted many dragon soul bones, and there was almost one on every single giant dragon skeleton. They were very easy to identify as any bone that wasn't white had to be a soul bone. As expected of the world of true dragons, almost every single one of them had a soul bone. However, Tang Wuling didn't touch even a single one of those soul bones. It was already a tragedy that these true dragons had all fallen here. How could he compound their misery by taking their soul bones as well? Thus, Tang Wuling repeated this uneventful process day after day, and the dragon tomb was slowly cleared out by his tireless efforts. We can't wait any longer. The delegation is about to set off. We've already notified the Tang sect of the current situation, and if Wu Lin were to return, the Tang sect will find a way to deliver him to us. An entire year had passed since the Shrek Academy team had come to the Douluo continent. During this past year, they'd experienced many things with the Douluo continent delegation. They'd first been attacked by the Green Skull renegades, then participated in the continental young elites tournaments, then traveled through this continent. They had learned many things during this trip to the Douluo continent, and they'd witnessed many things that didn't exist on the Douluo continent. If it weren't for the fact that Tang Wu Lin had disappeared once again, their trip would have been perfect. However, they hadn't seen Tang Wu Lin ever since he parted with them. Wu Zhangkong had brought back terrible news from the Tang sect, stating that Tang Wu Lin had disappeared during a mission in a small world. That small world had lost connection with the Douluo continent, which meant that they had most likely lost this leader of theirs forever. When they first received this news, the Shrek Academy team had been filled with disbelief. They refused to believe that their leader had disappeared just like that. However, after receiving confirmation from the Tang sect on multiple occasions, they had no choice but to accept the truth, which was that Tang Wu Lin really had disappeared, or in other words, he had died. For the very first time, this group of teenagers came to realize just how fragile life was. The Douluo continent delegation should have left a month ago, but Shrek Academy, led by Elikai, insisted on waiting for a while longer, trying to liaise with the Tang sect in an attempt to find that lost small world. Chapter 728. However, even the powerful Tang sect was unable to ascertain the situation in that small world. That was a change in space and time itself, and it was already quite extraordinary that they'd been able to make use of a small world like that one, but it was beyond their capabilities to try and recover it. As such, they waited for another month in vain, and this was the day that they had to go back. Gu Yue stood in silence at the bow of the ship, casting her gaze into the distance in a certain direction. Ever since Tang Wu Lin had parted with them, she'd become a lot less talkative, and following Tang Wu Lin's disappearance, she'd become even more withdrawn, to the point where she would often go an entire day without speaking. Everyone else wished that they could do something, but it was certainly far beyond their capabilities to find a lost small world, so they had no idea what they could do. Nothing bad ever happens to good people. I'm sure our captain is fine. Yue's Heng Yu sighed. Shu Shao pouted, and said, if we'd known that this trip would be so fraught with trouble, we should have never come in the first place. Yuan and Yui sighed. What's the point of saying something like that now? What's happened has already happened. I just don't know why he decided to leave rather than stay with us. Everyone reflexively turned to Gu Yue as this subject was brought up again. No one knew exactly what had happened, but they could sense that Tang Wu Lin's departure most likely had something to do with Gu Yue. It was just that neither of them had said anything, so they could only continue to speculate. She couldn't help but ask, Gu Yue, Wu Lin's been gone for such a long time. Aren't you worried about him at all? Gu Yue turned to him and suddenly said, he'll be fine. Tears immediately welled up in Shishi's eyes upon hearing this. What do you mean he'll be fine? He's been gone for so long, yet you've done nothing aside from shutting yourself off from everyone. We all tried our best to find him, but you haven't said a single word. You weren't like this back when we were at the academy. Why have you become like this? That's enough. Yuan and Yui urged as she tugged on Shishi's sleeve. Shishi's emotional outburst was slightly irrational, but his words really did echo the thoughts of his companions. Gu Yue really had changed ever since they come to the Douluo continent. However, Gu Yue seemed to have been completely unaffected by Shishi's outburst, and she merely murmured to herself, I'll wait for him until he returns to Shrek Academy. Huff, 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 huff. Tang Wu Lin was gasping for air, but his eyes were filled with excitement. The entire dragon tomb had been emptied aside from one final skeleton, which was also the largest skeleton of all, the one that belonged to the Mountain Dragon King. Not only was the Mountain Dragon King's skeleton downright colossal, each and every one of its bones was also immensely heavy. The extreme density of its bones resulted in an indescribable texture, and each bone was like a piece of the earth itself. It took Tang Wu Lin over 10 times the amount of time to disassemble this colossal skeleton compared to normal true dragon skeletons, and a vast amount of time and effort were expended once again to arrange the bones in the hole he dug. This was a hole that was over a kilometer deep. Just digging this hole had taken him what seemed like an eternity. Ever since he'd begun burying these skeletons, he'd used his bloodline soul skills and the soul skills he'd invented tens of thousands of times, to the extent that using them had become second nature to him. Farewell. After burying you, I'm finally going to leave. Tang Wu Lin appraised the skeleton of the Mountain Dragon King with a smile on his face before pushing the surrounding soil into the massive hole. After burying the remains of the Mountain Dragon King, he had fulfilled his promise. The bleak auras of grief and despair in the dragon tomb had already completely vanished, and Tang Wu Lin had planted many of the plants in the Dragon Valley small world next to the massive graves. All of these plants grew exceptionally well after being transferred to the dragon tomb, and they gave this entire place a sense of vitality. Whoosh! A ball of yellow light materialized beside the Mountain Dragon King before forming a dragon soul that rushed directly toward Tang Wu Lin. The dragon soul possessed less than 1% of the Mountain Dragon King's power, but it was still over 30 meters tall. However, it didn't have any wings, so it was looking quite clumsy and maladroit as it tried to climb out of the giant hole. Tang Wu Lin burst into laughter upon seeing this. I already told you yesterday that you don't have to do this. You can save your energy for yourself. I'll be leaving after I bury you. The giant dragon soul made its way over to Tang Wu Lin, and it didn't open its mouth to say anything, but there was wisdom shimmering within its eyes. It bent its hind legs and knelt down before Tang Wu Lin, lowering its massive head before rubbing it against his body. Light then flashed, and streams of yellow light flowed into Tang Wu Lin's body. The dragon souls manifested by the Mountain Dragon King were the most powerful among all of the dragon souls conjured up by the true dragon skeletons, and after absorbing one of them, Tang Wu Lin could go 7 days and 7 nights without experiencing any hunger or thirst. Thus, his body was replenished, and the surrounding soil suddenly surged into the giant hole on its own, as if it were being drawn by some kind of invisible force. Tang Wu Lin smiled upon seeing this. As expected of the Mountain Dragon King, even its remains still possessed such a high level of autonomy. The giant hole was gradually filled, and the Mountain Dragon King's enormous body slowly disappeared. The final giant dragon had been buried. Meanwhile, the dragon soul manifested by the Mountain Dragon King was also gradually becoming transparent as it injected its energy incessantly into Tang Wu Lin's body. Tang Wu Lin suddenly discovered that at the center of the Mountain Dragon King's dragon soul, there was an entirely transparent bone. The bone was rather strange in appearance as it seemed to possess countless facets, and even the slightest trace of light shining on it made it extremely dazzling in appearance. Is that a soul bone? Hey, stop burying yourself. You forgot one of your bones. Tang Wu Lin hurriedly said to the giant hole that was slowly being filled. However, the dragon soul of the Mountain Dragon King, which had almost completely vanished at this point, shook its head at him in response. It raised a front claw before pointing it at him, then pointing it at itself, then pointed it at him again before it nodded its huge head. A surprised look appeared on Tang Wu Lin's face as he asked, "You're giving this to me?" The dragon soul nodded once again, and Tang Wu Lin could see strong affection and benevolence harbored within its eyes. The translucent dazzling soul bone whizzed over to Tang Wu Lin in a flash, and before he had a chance to react, it entered his body along with what remained of the dragon soul's energy. All of a sudden, Tang Wu Lin suddenly felt his body become significantly heavier, and he reflexively sat down onto the ground, following his entire being completely stiffened. He felt as if he'd become a mountain that was directly connected with the earth, and boundless energy was surging toward him from all directions before fusing into his body. In that instant, he felt as if he could hear all of the giant dragons beneath the earth roaring at him with elation, as if to express their gratitude for everything he'd done. There was no longer any grief or despair. All of them had finally found the home that they belonged to. A joyful smile appeared on Tang Wu Lin's face. It was only proper to give deceased beings a final burial, regardless of what had happened to them during their lives. At the very least, this vast expanse of land could act as their home following their demise. Tang Wu Lin sincerely hoped that no one would ever disturb them in their resting place in the future. He wore a gentle smile on his face as he said, "My friends, I'm not sure if I can call you that, but during this period of time, I've constantly been with all of you, and even though I'm doing the same thing every day, I didn't find it boring in the slightest. I could sense your emotions, and they urged me to persevere. So thank you for keeping me company. I don't know how long I've been here, but I don't regret anything as this is a memory that I will cherish for the rest of my life." Chapter 729. He transmuted his will into the earth, and the entire dragon tomb trembled slightly. His eyes were closed so he couldn't see anything, but there were dense bursts of light erupting from the ground all around him. There were lights of all types of different colors, and in the end, they combined as one to form a rainbow halo that silently revolved around his body. A gentle feeling of intimacy surrounded his entire body, and he felt as if he could hear the cries of countless dragons, all of which were filled with joy and elation rather than grief and indignation. In the end, this rainbow light converged to form a water droplet-shaped crystal that contained 9 different colors within. The crystal drifted down onto Tang Wulin's right wrist, and a thin 9-colored chain appeared, strapping the crystal to his wrist. All of a sudden, Tang Wulin's body shuddered, and he felt as if his spiritual world had been smashed open. His spiritual power, which had been stagnant for a long time, suddenly began to increase at a rapid rate. This process didn't last a very long time, but Tang Wulin was suddenly struck by the feeling that his horizons had broadened. Even though he still had his eyes closed, he could sense everything around him with brilliant clarity. He could sense that all of the bones in his torso, including his spine, his breastbone, and his ribs, were all glowing with a dazzling light. It was as if a crystalline suit of armor had been fitted onto those bones, filling him with an indescribable sense of power. This was a torso bone. The Mountain Dragon King had given him a torso bone. Among the soul bones that soul masters could fuse into their bodies, there were a few types that were the most valuable. Without taking into consideration the ages of the soul bones, head bones, torso bones, and external soul bones were the rarest and also the most precious. External soul bones were extremely valuable as they could exist independently outside of the 6 most common types of soul bones, and they were exceedingly rare. In contrast, head bones and torso bones brought the greatest enhancements to soul masters, and they were also the most difficult to obtain. Among the descendants of the dragon god, the Mountain Dragon King possessed the most powerful defensive prowess, so its torso bone was undoubtedly one of the most exceptional torso bones anyone could hope to obtain. With the addition of this torso bone, Tang Wulin's defensive prowess would be elevated to a whole new level. This could even make it a lot easier for him to withstand the influxes of energy from breaking golden dragon king seals in the future. Aside from sensing the fact that he obtained a new soul bone, Tang Wulin continued to extend his consciousness outward, and everything around him appeared in his mind with brilliant clarity, even though his eyes remained firmly shut. This indicated that his spiritual power seemed to have ascended to a new level. 500 points of spiritual power were required to reach the Spirit Sea realm, and that was already an extremely important hurdle for the vast majority of soul masters as it determined whether they'd be able to become high-level soul masters. Without sufficient spiritual power, one would find themselves unable to fuse powerful soul bones into their bodies. Tang Wulin had already reached the Spirit Sea realm, but at this moment, he felt as if he'd make a breakthrough to a higher realm. He felt as if his spirit had become an abyssal prison. If his spirit were the world, then the upper boundary would be heaven while the lower boundary would be hell. This was the Spirit Abyss realm, the realm that was commonly referred to as the limit for a normal human's spiritual power. Tang Wulin only knew of 2 other soul masters around the same age as him whose spiritual powers had reached the Spirit Abyss realm. One of them was Dou Yue, while the other one was Dou Yuna, who possessed a spirit attribute martial soul. Such immense spiritual power was the mandatory foundation to acquire a legendary soul spirit. With this foundation, one would be able to fuse with any level of spirit souls, even orange and red ones. However, each person can only fuse with 1 orange and 1 red soul spirit, and after fusing with one of those 2 types of soul spirits, one's capacity to fuse with other soul spirits would revert back to that of a being with spiritual power at the Spirit Sea realm. If no red or orange soul spirits had been fused with, then the upper limit for the number of soul spirits of other levels that could be fused with was 5. Generally speaking, the Spirit Abyss realm was the limit of human spiritual power. At the same time, after reaching that realm, soul masters would no longer be limited by their spiritual power as it would be sufficient to support them until they progressed to become titled Doulos. Never would Tang Wulin have thought that he'd make such a significant breakthrough in his spiritual power here in this dragon valley. This was a form of reciprocation from all of the dragon skeletons. After that, Tang Wulin's consciousness gradually faded, and he entered a deep meditative state again. He required time both to completely fuse with the Mountain Dragon King's torso bone, as well as to adjust to his new level of spiritual power, which had reached the Spirit Abyss realm. 500 points of spiritual power were required to reach the Spirit Sea realm, and that number spiked sharply to 5,000 for the Spirit Abyss realm. After reaching the Spirit Abyss realm, it was virtually guaranteed that he'd be able to become a titled Douluo in the future unless something were to happen to his body. But was Tang Wulin's body ever of any concern? The answer to that was, of course, no. Shrek Academy. During the past 2 years, the Academy had seemed to be very quiet, and no noteworthy events took place. Ever since the new generation of Shrek 7 monsters had been announced 2 years ago, some changes had been happening within the Academy. The first graders, which was renowned as the most exceptional year level in the Academy, had become second graders. The core members among them, Dou Yue, Yu Xinglin, Shu Lizhi, Shi Shi, and Shu Shaoan, had all been inducted into the inner court, and at the same time, Yuan and Yui and Yue Zhengyu, who had become third graders, had also received the same honor. After that, these 7 people were announced to be the new generation of Shrek 7 monsters. At the same time, they were granted the right to accept any challenges from Soul Masters teams below a 6 ring level for a year. If no teams below the 6 ring level could defeat them during this year, then they would be confirmed as Shrek 7 monsters. According to the rules of Shrek Academy, once a generation of Shrek 7 monsters was confirmed, then all 7 members would hold this title unless they were to perish, willingly relinquish the title, or become members of the Sea Gods Pavilion. As such, Shrek Academy always exercised caution when selecting Shrek 7 monsters. Only the most exceptional prodigies, or those who had made significant contributions to the Academy were considered. No one could dispute the contributions the current generation of Shrek 7 monsters had made to the Academy. Just the fact that they had traveled to the Douluo Empire and defended the honor of Shrek Academy was an undeniably significant contribution. Of course, there were also those who were unwilling to accept such arrangements. For example, the disciples that had already entered the inner court challenged them countless times during the coming year, but Dou Yue was always able to lead them to victory. Thus, a year later, they were finally confirmed to be Shrek 7 monsters. Life in the outer court continued as normal. The current second grades class 1, which was once the most exceptional first grades class 1, now had Wisuo as their class president with Luo Gixing as the vice president. Even without Dou Yue in the other, the second grades class 1 was still exceptional. Wisuo, Luo Gixing, Chu Yucheng, Yang Niangsha, and Zheng Yuran had all become one-word battle armor masters. All they had to do was pass the inner court exam, and they'd officially become inner court disciples. With their current power levels, this was clearly just a matter of time. Prior to the conclusion of the second year, over 10 disciples from that cohort entered the inner court, thereby further cementing their reputation as the most exceptional year level. They were also known among the outer court disciples as Shrek's golden generation. Shrek Academy, inner court. Dou Yue stood beside the Sea God's lake, and it was as if she already fused as one with the natural scenery around her. She cast her gaze toward the Sea God's island with a blank expression on her face, and it was impossible to tell what she was thinking. A figure suddenly began to travel toward her from the island, moving at a rapid speed. The figure had silver hair and purple eyes, and she was an exquisite beauty. After 3 years, Naya had also grown up. She was already 16 years old, and she was gorgeous as a celestial maiden. She was renowned as a once in 10,000 years beauty in Shrek Academy, and she was undoubtedly by far the number 1 beauty in the Academy. Naya gently landed beside Dou Yue. The Sea God's island was where the elders of the Sea Gods Pavilion resided, and only the direct disciples of those elders were allowed on the island, while most of the other inner court disciples had to study and live outside of the island. Compared to in the outer court, there was more freedom in one's education in the inner court. Disciples could choose what they wanted to learn and make appointments with their teachers to arrange lessons. It was also very simple to graduate from the inner court. All one had to do was become a 2-word battle armor master. It sounded simple, but it was much easier said than done. Despite the increased level of freedom and flexibility, every student who entered the inner disciple still worked tirelessly to better themselves, and none of them dared to grow complacent. There had always been a strange phenomenon in Shrek Academy, which was that among those who entered the inner court, very few of them were willing to leave even after becoming 2-word battle armor masters. Instead, most of them chose to continue to cultivate in the academy or become teachers themselves. This positive cycle had repeated itself for over 10,000 years to create the current Shrek Academy. Naya was already a young woman now. She was tall and slender, and as she stood beside Dou Yue, it was quite difficult to tell that there was an age gap of 2 to 3 years between them. The two of them stood side by side, and neither of them said anything. Chapter 730. From an appearance perspective, Dou Yue couldn't even hold a candle to Naya. In other words, they simply went on the same level. However, for some reason, Naya didn't seem to possess more of a presence than Dou Yue. When is he coming back? It's already been such a long time, Naya said in a cold voice. I don't know. Dou Yue replied with a shake of her head. Naya suddenly flared up with rage. You don't know? What did you say to me before? You promised me that he was fine and that he'd be back for sure. So why hasn't he come back even after 3 whole years? You killed him already, didn't you? Douluo turned to Naya and countered. Would you have failed to sense his demise if I killed him? I didn't kill him and I don't know why he hadn't returned yet. However, I'm sure that he's still alive. Perhaps he stayed over there and became Douluo's fiancé. Naya suddenly fell silent upon hearing this, and she turned back toward the direction of the sea god's island. No, my brother isn't that kind of person. He wouldn't fall in love with someone so easily. He's definitely going to come back. He's just been delayed by something along the way, Naya said in a determined voice. Douluo suddenly asked, if he does come back, is our bet still on? Naya raised her head in a proud manner. Of course. There's no way that you'll be able to beat me. Douluo's expression remained unchanged as she said, but I can't keep waiting here any longer. There are too many things that I need to take care of. You can shirk all your responsibilities and live a leisurely life here, but I can't do the same. You should know the burden on my shoulders. If you're not willing to carry that burden, then I must take up the mantle. Hence, I'm only going to wait for 3 more months before I leave. I promised him that I would attend the inner court with him, but if he doesn't come back, then it's not my fault. He's the one that's breaking our promise, and I have to leave. Naya shuddered slightly upon hearing this, and a gentle look suddenly appeared in her eyes. Douluo turned to her with a smile on her face, but the smile was rather bleak and lonely. Are you going to persuade me not to leave? You can't bring yourself to do that, right? In essence, you're the same as me. You're also just running away from reality. Naya asked, then what if my brother comes back? Will you still leave then? I will. Douluo replied without any hesitation. I can't keep everyone waiting any longer. There's not much time left, and many things need to be set into motion. The spirit pagoda is asking me to take on my role there as early as possible. Naya took a deep breath and said, all right, you can go if you insist. I'll always be here waiting for him. You said that he's still alive, so he'll definitely come back. I'm sure of it. Douluo merely smiled and offered no response to this. She tucked a few stray strands of long hair behind her ear before turning and making her way toward the main school building of the inner court. Naya looked on at her departing figure, and she suddenly smiled as she murmured to herself, as long as he comes back, you'll lose the bet for sure. In reality, you've already lost to me. Have you still not realized this, or are you simply unwilling to admit it? She then looked up into the sky and sighed. When are you coming back, brother? You're not actually staying in the Douluo Empire to become the princess's fiancé, are you? At the main gate of Shrek Academy, or to put it more accurately, the main gate Shrek City, an extra long luxury soul car slowly came to a stop, and the right car door was open, following which a man emerged from within. This was a burly mountain of a man with a gleaming bald head, wearing tight-fitting formal attire that further accentuated his strong presence. He skirted around the back of the car before opening the rear door on the left. A slender calf with skin as fair as snow emerged from the car first, followed by a long white dress as a young woman exited the car. Standing beside the bald man, she appeared extremely petite, and she had a head of long wavy curls that trailed down her back. She gave off a pure and refreshing disposition, and there was an expectant look on her exquisitely gorgeous features as she glanced up at the plaque before her with an indescribable hint of desire in her eyes. The bald man strode directly toward the main gate of Shrek City. People were granted free access through these gates, but the same didn't apply to vehicles, and the bald man was clearly aware of this. Aside from the two of them, there were also 2 men in uniforms that got out of the car one after another. It was quite apparent that these 2 worked for an official department of the Federation, and they quickly strode over to the other 2 people before leading them into Shrek City. That's right, even an official vehicle from the Federation wasn't permitted to drive into Shrek Academy without receiving special permission beforehand. After making their way into Shrek City, both the bald man and the white-dressed young woman were inspecting their surroundings with curiosity in their eyes. Big brother Long, this place is so lavish. The Douluo continent really does look more fun than our continent, the young woman said. The bald man nodded with an intense look in his eyes. So this is where Shrek Academy is situated. I wonder how special this academy is for it to be regarded as the #1 academy on this entire continent. The young woman smiled and said, anywhere is special as long as he's there. The bald man turned to her with a peculiar look in his eyes. Yuna, it's been more than 3 years. The young woman shook her head and interjected, there's no need to try and persuade me any further, brother Long. I've already made up my mind. I know you mean well, and know that you've always been very good to me, but I'm not changing my mind for anyone. 3 years ago, I threatened to kill myself so I wouldn't be forced into an engagement, and now, my destiny is completely in my own hands. Have you forgotten that in his fit of rage, father abolished me as a royal? I'm no longer royalty, and nor will my descendants be of royal lineage. If Tang Wuling were here, he would immediately recognize this white-dressed young woman as the mischievous princess of the Douluo Empire, Dayuna. The man accompanying her was none other than the pillar of Monster Academy, the man who was touted as a once-in-a-millennium prodigy, Dragon King Long Yue. A resigned look appeared on Long Yue's face as he said, Yuna, you know His Majesty wasn't serious. Your 4th brother, who's the designated heir to the throne, has already told me that even if His Majesty refuses to forgive you, the first thing he does after inheriting the throne will be to reinstate your royal status. Dayuna smiled as she replied, of course I'm aware of all this. Father only put on an enraged display for others to see so he could protect the dignity of the royal family, but at the same time, he's also given me freedom. As for whether my future children are royals or not, that's not important. Perhaps I'll be staying in the Douluo continent for the rest of my life. A cold look flashed through Long Yue's eyes as his hands balled up into tight fists. He really wanted to beat the crap of that guy right now. Let's go straight to Shrek Academy. I'm not going anywhere until I see him. In the Shrek Academy inner court dormitory building, Shishi sat on the couch in his own room with a dazed and disoriented look in his eyes. He had been like this for the past few days, and he'd even stopped cultivating during this time. After entering the inner court, the treatment he received was naturally vastly different compared to when he was in the outer court. Here in the inner court, each student had their own separate room, and the food they were provided with was far better than would have been available to them in the past. On top of that, they didn't have to pay any fees, either. It could be said that transitioning from the outer court to the inner court was like ascending from hell to heaven. Here, all of the cultivation resources and facilities were top-notch, and they also had the most outstanding teachers. Wei Zhangkong didn't come to the inner court with them. Instead, he remained in the outer court to instruct the second grades class 1. However, he had said that after this final year of teaching, he was going to quit as a teacher so he could come to the inner court to cultivate and hone his battle armor. Knock, knock, knock. A burst of door knocking suddenly rang out, and Shishi was given a fright before rising to his feet and hurriedly opening the door. He was greeted by the sight of Yue Zhangyu standing outside, and he brushed past Shishi as he strode directly into his room. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.